Yeah, I really love that idea. Like, oftentimes when I'm writing novels or I'm script writing, and I am going by the computer when I'm writing, when I do it, but I'll often print, and I'll use that as my separating tool. And when I print and I'm holding it in my hand, I know I'm the editor,
Right,
and I'm editing by hand, right?
right.
And then I go back, and then my computer ends up being my canvas. But like you, because I'm also a painter and you have the painting behind me, and maybe that's why, also we have a lot of uh, uh, similarities between us and some of the things that we do. I also need to paint in between making films or writing,
Right.
and I find that it lends itself to the work. Or sometimes things I can't express in the filmmaking, I need to do in the painting, and now I've been able to incorporate them into the films, and that kind of needs to happen. So I really love that you said that, and that you got to kind of need to switch your hats for it. But also this whole thing of, the people that tell you, or maybe have told you in your younger life, Michael, you can only do one thing, and actually what's funny is you're talking to the School of Media Arts now, and I'm wearing this shirt of media, and now everywhere is being the School of Media Arts, and everyone's encouraged to do everything.
Right.
But I'm sort of curious about your process in what
Okay.
you do. So when you're devising something, how does it usually go about for you? So you said sometimes you're collaging. Are you thinking of melody? Are you thinking of image? Do you have any advice for how students might be able to go about it? I know everyone's going to have their own process, but I'm just sort of curious about yours, or if you have any techniques that we could try.
So oftentimes for me, when I'm scoring something, or more often than not, I'm actually making records because I don't need a film to come in and me to be working on that. So usually when I'm working on some kind of track, I'll get to a point where either I'm a little lost or I'm so obsessed with one sound that I can't actually take in all the colors. I think a lot, if you like say if you were shooting something and you're obsessed with making sure you get the right facial expression out of an actor, or you're trying to shoot something, some kind of scene, and you're really obsessed with a certain element of it, it's just great for me. And currently I just moved to this studio 2 months ago. I can swivel my chair and I can let it play, and I'll put it on a loop, and then I'll be over here with collages. And it's the same thing. Like if I have a piece of paper, such as, like this, and I've got one, I often these days I've been starting with a circle, and I'll just trace out a circle, and then I'll move, and I'll put a piece of paper there and one other piece of paper there, and I will move them around for an hour until whatever relationship they're supposed to have, again, removing myself. I've just become the conduit. I just become, and trust my experience and how much I've done this, whether it's education or how many films I've seen or whatever, that I'm going to find the strongest place to stop for that, and then I will glue that, and then I'll look at that. And then eventually I'm going to hear something in the loop that I've got going on over here, and then I'm going to stop and go, okay, that's how I'm going to solve that. That's where the piano melody enters. And I'm in constant conversation. What I've really discovered for me is you have to take yourself out of the equation. You are not the grand god of this world. That's the idea might be yours. The elements in that world hopefully are yours. But at some point, those elements, if they're strong enough to actually exist as a thing or as a way of sharing a story, they've got to take over. They have to become in control. And it's just your job as a director, writer, creator, whatever, to kind of get out of the way, but then also observe and trust that your instincts will take over enough to go, that's the strongest relationship. Whether it's a circle and a square over here, or whether this is what this character is supposed to say, or the camera should actually be over there, not over here as we're shooting this scene, whatever the relationship is, at some point, you've got to trust that your instinct is correct. and just make the decision and then kind of go with it. Because a lot of people get paralyzed, I think, also with going, I don't know what the right decision is, because there, especially now with the computer, even with music, there are 100 million decisions you can make, and you're not paying for it. Like when I first started in music, you had to go to the recording studio, and every hour could be up to $200 an hour, and you got the best take you could get, and you had to move on. And now I can sit here and I can play one note for 6 years until that one note makes sense. But at some point, endless decisions just, to me, can create endless loose ends. And so at some point, you got to go, this is the universe I made. What is the strongest relationship inside of this universe? Right? In terms of this piece of artwork, this piece of writing, and this film, because we're kind of living in an age, you know, I think that we've got all these things at our disposal, and computers are awesome. So even when I, you know, make fun of something like this, I couldn't make all the records I make. I couldn't score the films I do without my own little home studio and the ability to edit right here. And just like you, PK, when you're saying, like, you know, when I print it out, now I can go slide over here and I'm going to be crossing out. And now I'm a different person. And so I really do think there's something tactile about doing two things at once and just trying to embrace, go, where's the strongest relationship? And not think that, you know, I'm a genius, or yeah, I'm so good at this, or I'm terrible at this, or I'm afraid I'm going to fail. It's almost, you got to remove all that shit and go, this universe is going to devise and say, this is what makes sense for this universe, for this particular piece. Doesn't mean that the idea you had isn't great. It might be great for something else, but it doesn't fit this realm. So that's kind of where I always try to check in with myself after I come back to something. And why I like having two is you can go back and forth and get some distance. If you stare at something long enough, you can make anything true. You can make yourself go cross-eyed and go, oh yeah, I definitely see a tennis player in there. And you're looking at a picture of a pool. Like, but no, there's a tennis player. I can see it.
Did Michael freeze? Did we lose Michael? Well, I'm sure he's going to come back on. I really like what Michael was saying, especially this idea of taking yourself. Can you all hear me? Can you nod your heads if you? I really like this idea that he's talking about of taking yourself out of the equation. And it's something I was talking about with Nick Karpinski and also some of the graduate students in the graduate colloquium the other day. There was this director, I went to one of the Oscar celebrations where you had all the international directors that were nominated for an Oscar, and they were all like sitting there doing like a Q&A. And one of them was Thomas Vinterberg, and he did the movie Another Round, and he also did The Hunt. And he was basically talking about, he was giving an anecdote about him and Ingmar Bergman, who directed Wild Strawberries. And he got this advice where Ingmar Bergman told him, hey, you know, when you're doing a film, always make sure you have another film in the pipeline. And he didn't take that advice. And so when he finished his first film, he was about to do his second, he was kind of paralyzed, like Mike is talking about, because he was worried about how his first film was going to be received, right? And I think that what Mike is getting to, and hopefully this story will be completed right at the time that Mike comes back on the line, is that sometimes we can paralyze ourselves with this sort of perfectionist attitude that we have. And when we have multiple headspaces to go to, like, okay, this is the time for editing, or this is the time to go to writing, or this is the time to think about this. When we give ourselves those spaces to do it, it sort of allows for an opportunity for something else to come through. And I have found for myself that when I work on 4 or 5 films at the same time is when I'm perfect, because I never care about one film too much, you know, that I go crazy that it's not working out. Because the truth of the matter is, when you're a filmmaker, none of the films is ever working out perfectly. They're all really, really painstakingly difficult, and you want to punch yourself every day. Just you're always dealing with problems. But when you have 5 of them and one of them's, gone to shit, right? You can be like, okay, well, let's pull out the other one. Something good happened with this one. Let's put this on the table. So I see Kaylee's nodding, and you can agree with it. So I think that's one consolation for us. I don't know if Michael is back, so I'm going to unmute
I am
myself.
back.
Did you hear what I said about taking yourself out of the equation?
Yeah, I got the tail end of it.
And probably the other thing I would say is what you're talking about also reminds me of surfing itself. And I know how much you love surfing, but it's almost like to be a good artist, you got to have an ability to allow the accident around you. And I think the other thing you're sort of talking about with these hundreds of thousands of opportunities is making some type of constraint. And do you actively pick a constraint sometimes because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. You absolutely, especially with music these days, because at my disposal is not only a full orchestra, an entire, um, you know, I don't know, probably over 1 million sounds in terms of synthesis. Plus, I have all this analog gear that I still love because the blend to me is what makes real music. Like I can't do it like solely electronically. It drives me crazy. But yeah, sometimes you have to go. Even when I compose, I try to pick 4 chords or 3 chords. It might be 3 notes. Like I'm staying here until I can't take these any further. And I'm not allowed to play anything else until these 3 are exhausted, or I pick 3 sounds or 3 guitar pedals. Or in my collages, I always start with what black and white and red, as you can see back there. Like those are, and it doesn't mean I won't leave that world. It's just I start there and then let's see what happens. And but sometimes I'm like, I can't use those colors. I'll take because I have everyone's got their preference, everyone's got their pocket. And sometimes I have to go, nope, throwing all those out. I would never use glossy paper in collages. And this month I bought 50 magazines that are all glossy paper because I can't stand how it looks in collages. I like old 1920s or earlier paper. And now I'm trying to break out of that a little bit. And the first 10 sucked. I threw them in the trash. Nothing you make is precious. I'm sorry, it's just not. Everything is just a step to getting to the next thing. Just you could make the most perfect record, the most perfect film. Well, what are you going to do the next time? If that one's so precious and perfect, you're excuse my French, but you're fucked. You might as well just stop. Like the day you become actually complete is the day you should burst into dust. So like, and all this idea of being a complete person, I'm like, I hope I'm never complete until I die. And that is completion, right? Doesn't mean you can't find happiness or joy or satisfaction in something you made. You want to be like, okay, I made the best work I can. And this is what it resulted in. And sometimes, you're going to like that. And sometimes you go, man, that just didn't work. And that's fine. I think failure is way more of a teacher than success. So we've all heard these kind of things somewhere in our lives in some way or another. But every decision, as far as I'm concerned in this art world, is constraints are great. Sometimes you got to change them, to take them off. And especially with technology, you have to make constraints in some way. You somewhere along the line, you have to go, at least while you're starting, here's my 4 little walls. And then as you get working, the walls can expand, they can grow taller, you can burn them down, right? That's what are great about rules, because it gives you a place to start. But as soon as they feel confiding, then break them. But don't just break them because, right? Now, we all want to be like, I want to be seen, I want to be who I am, I want to be felt. It's like, okay, great. Why don't you try just being a person, and that'll happen. It's just like when you're working inside of an artwork and be, oh, I really want to express this thing. It's like, well, just to express the desire to express it. And then the world itself will reveal itself, because you already essentially everything you are has already happened, right? I know we all say we shouldn't live in the past. Well, you don't even exist without a past. So it's like every thought we've ever had is like we've already thought it before. It's just whether or not we gave it the time to take it to its logical conclusion or illogical conclusion. And that's usually what happens. Is it just every idea you have is gold, and every idea you have is crap. It just depends on how much time you want to spend with it. So, um, so I think constraint is great, and you know, and Bergman, and his whole filmmaking is that guy drove himself insane on a million different levels, and he's one of my great. I think he's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. But when you read about his life, talk about misery. And his films are miserable in the most beautiful way, because I mean I do think beauty is sadness. So and I don't mean in some emo way where you got to be a sad human, but I think the most beautiful things are the things that are lost, that are frail, that don't stick around, that fall through our hands, that we missed. Because if you really look at most stories, they're either love stories or death stories. Like there's not a lot of variations. So anyway, yeah, now I'm going off on some other tangent. So it yeah. What else you got, PK?
No, this is a good tangent. And we'll take it there, which is this idea of the sublime, which you're getting into,
Yeah.
or the idea of the happening, right? And that capturing that moment, these moments of what you're talking about, and how can we hold on to them? And I think that's something for both you and me that we've tried to capture in different ways in both of our art forms. And how can we do that? So I'm curious for you how much the improvisational and capturing that has been for you, and what that has meant, and how you're able to do it, and maybe how other people can do it, and what your advice would be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hope all you guys are improvising every day. I mean, you're alive, you're walking out your door, therefore you're improvising. Like that's how basic I think improvisation is. You might have an idea of what you're gonna go to the coffee shop, and you got class here, here, and here. Then I got to go to work. Then I got to hang with the wife and kids, or take out the dog, whatever it is. And um, those things, like discipline, is something that I think is often overlooked in play in an improv, right? Because it's like anything goes, but not everything goes. And so, in terms of where improv came from me, again, was playing as a child. But when I went to college, every musician I was around was way better than I was. They were all classically trained. They'd been playing since they were 6. And I just wanted to really rip on the guitar, to be honest with you. You know, I wanted to be awesome on the guitar, whether I was Jimi Hendrix or Frank Zappa, it doesn't matter. I wanted to be awesome on it. And I couldn't be, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So I had to improvise. I had to fake it. I knew enough what sounded good, and I knew what didn't sound good enough. But what those guys made me do is to get in situations where I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had enough tools to rely on what tools I had, and to maximize those in a way that I think you just blossom. So even when you're making work, especially as you're learning a craft, you got to take what you do know. If you're really awesome on the phone, or you really get lighting, or you really understand how to set design, or things you've been doing since you were 5 years old, something you're good at doing something since you were that young. I don't, because it's something you took as a kid and you just kept playing with it over and over and over again. And we don't change that much as we grow older. Emotionally, I don't think we get past like 7, even if we're really sophisticated and calm. I think we're still 7 years old. So improv for me is the greatest way to start something. Is you can have an idea really, really strongly, even storyboarded out. But when you go to rehearse it, when you go to practice shots, you got to also play. If you're just like rigidly going from one thing to another thing, I'm not sure you're making anything creative. You're at that point, you're creating products, right? And so there's always got to be an element in play. You'll hear this a lot when people talk about how they rehearse for a film. And some directors like, we're going to rehearse the hell out of this, and they do it. And but a lot of times you'll also hear like, oh, we just did one extra one because I had this one idea and I just wanted to play. And that's the one that gets put in the film. Or that's what triggered the next thing. And then suddenly the film becomes alive, where it was like, oh, we weren't sure this film was even going anywhere. And then actor X did this. The director said, well, let's try it that way, but backwards. And then boom, they're onto a whole new world. And that's the idea of improv. Is it doesn't mean that you have to, it's not willy-nilly. It's not just make it up as you go. It's not just, it's, you definitely have to be able to play with whatever precious thing that you have in your hands, and then play with it. At least always do a play take. Always. If the scene's perfect, then that's, you can always give one of your actors, or you with the camera, or wherever it is you're going with this, and go, basically the idea is, on this take, don't give a fuck. And that those are the takes that usually you give way more of a fuck about, because it's just you and your guts, not you and, we got to get this shot, it's got to look like this. And yeah, if you're doing a car commercial, yeah, it does, because that's what you said you were going to do, and you got to crank it out, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, that's not an artistic process. It's a product creation. And so for me, and I think for anyone doing any kind of art, if you don't give yourself the permission to improvise and play, then I think you are not actually you're not allowing yourself to be creative at all, because that's true creativity. And it doesn't mean that's the best thing that's going to come out of it, but you are practicing that muscle. And all any of this is a magnifying glass put on top of your imagination. That's it. Because that's all you are. Your identity, what you think you are, what you think other people think you are, what your mom and dad think you are, what your wife or spouse think you are. And we're playing make-believe. And then we just go, yeah, this is the make-believe we're going to play for the next 30 years, for the next whatever years. And that's going to change when something else, when you lose someone, when you move somewhere, when you kiss someone, everything you thought you are, the best things in life that we experience, all that's gone in an instant. So when we practice improv and creativity, we're allowing that instant to be the focus, not everything it took to get to that instant. And I think that's a high skill for anyone that wants to do anything artistic for their lives. They have to practice it every day, because the rest of the world is going to try to take it away. And it's not in some vicious way. You got to drive a car. You got to go to the grocery store. You got to pay some bills. It's all very logical. Click the box. It's done. I feel good. Well, you should feel good, just about as good, when you go, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do today. We've just been trained to feel bad about that, but really good when we pay our bills. And I'm very guilty of it. I grew up with a grandmother who was like, before you eat, you pay your bills, because that was called responsibility. And I'm still that way. So I come in here and I fucking make whatever I make all day long so I can get away from that. But I still have to go home to the girlfriend, still got to pay my rent, still got to, make some money somehow. So I think it's crucial for anybody who wants a career in any kind of artistic medium to play and improvise. And even when you're making something, to always do a take where you don't give a fuck, or play or improvise, or however delicately you want to put it, or however intensely you want to put it. But that's, to me, where the real magic is. And because you don't know what's going to come out. You really don't. And like when PA was saying, like working on 5 films and one's going to shit. Well, it's usually because somebody's not letting go of something. Whether it's the actor, whether it's the DP, whether it's the guy who never gets you to set on time, whatever, someone's not letting go of what they think it's supposed to be. And usually when things are going shit, even when I'm playing with bands, it's because someone's trying to force their will on something and the conversation's dead. Right? So that's my 2 cents on that. And I hope that made sense to everybody. And that, I think, as burgeoning artists or whatever, wherever you guys are in your process, that improvising is a huge, huge important thing. And it's the most uncomfortable thing, because you are going to look like a fool sometimes. And again, that's part of the beauty of being human, is being, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Because if you think you do, I guess the old cliche is, how do you make God laugh? Make a plan. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. Like, I'm not some religious person, but I thought that saying, my grandmother said that a million times growing up. And every time when I get really frustrated when things don't go my way, or I have to throw another collage away because I try to force my will on it, I always just go, yeah, and there it is again. That silly little saying that my grandmother said. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really love that. And if I could just ask one more question before I turn it over to the students, Mike.
Please, yeah.
Um, it's one that I get often, but I think that you can answer it really well because we've had many conversations about this. And it's the one that we also get often from others, which is about fame and success,
Okay,
or
sure.
the chasing of fame or success, and how you or I have often focused on craft over the latter. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can put it in a certain way that I often have trouble with sort of framing it, but I love the way you have put it in the past.
Okay, sure. So I ended up in Los Angeles, not, you know, and I didn't really know what the hell Los Angeles was. I mean, obviously I grew up watching it. But to me, growing up in the 80s in New Hampshire, all I knew really about LA was Guns N' Roses, because I loved them, NWA, who I loved just as much, even though, I mean, and this is just being deadpan. I grew up in the whitest part of the freaking planet, probably in New Hampshire. So to me, it was completely foreign and awesome, but I had no idea where Compton was, or what a gang was, or any of that stuff. It was me and my old school television with the dials and the rabbit ears and the whole bit, right? And which I miss actually. So basically, I was a college professor at this tiny little college in New Hampshire that doesn't exist anymore, and um, I was trying to get out to California to surf. I'd become obsessed with surfing in New Hampshire and blizzards and the whole bit. So I'm not some California surf bro. It's just in New Hampshire. It was me and four other dudes. It was 37 degrees. There's a blizzard outside, and the coolest sound I've ever heard is snow hitting the ocean because it hisses. Um, Insane. And anyway, so I wanted to get out to California for the surf primarily, and I really wanted to get out of my small town in New Hampshire, which was really actually became really culturally powerful, and there was a lot of great musicians, whatever. But so I applied to Cal Arts, and I was like, well, if they'll give me a full ride, I'll go, because it was like 50 grand a semester, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. And they paid for 99.9% of it. The only thing they didn't pay for was housing. So I was like, well, okay, cool. And I didn't know where Valencia was. Still don't really. And if you don't know, Valencia and Cal Arts, I'm assuming you've all seen Edward Scissorhands, right? Um, the castle and Vincent Price and that little town is Burbank, but the castle was supposed to be Cal Arts, where I went to grad school. That's because he went there, and that's why they became famous, because of the animation. So anyway, I was going to go to school there, and they said, you should, like, where the hell do I live? And they're like, Los Angeles. And so anyway, lo and behold, 15 years ago, I ended up in LA, the home of fame, the home of celebrity, everything I freaking loathe. All right. And I didn't even know why I loathed it, other than it just seemed like it was crap, popular, and, and it was like the birth of Paris Hilton and all that garbage. And I was just like, I can't believe we're going to waste our time on that. Well, I mean, I look like the idiot if you look at this thing and all what fame's really become now, because now you can be famous from your bedroom and wherever. But so when it comes to fame and the pursuit of that, I guess for me the conundrum, and I think the problem for most people when they look at that, isn't me being like, oh, don't ever become famous or successful or make a ton of money. I've had money. I've made a chunk. I've made nothing doing this. I've had success. I've had times, I just moved to a smaller town outside of LA so I could surf. And I'm not going to be discovered here, and I'm getting a little too old that's not going to happen, and I don't care. But the issue I think that really people get caught up in is they think famous means that you've done something, right? And nothing you do is going to make you famous, all right? Nothing. What if you say you make a, I will say you make a great pop song. I don't know if any of you play music. I don't know what your backgrounds are, right? The pop song doesn't make you famous. It just makes you popular. It puts it on all the platforms. It's your fans that make you famous. So all fame is a popularity thing. It's got nothing to do with whether you're talented or whether you're beautiful or whether you're awesome or not. And so to me, it was always like, this is going to get in the way of actually doing anything truly creative. The most famous people are making popular things. And to me, popularity is to be distrusted. If everybody likes something, it's, to me, it's, there's something wrong with it, right? And it doesn't mean that it's bad. So wrong and bad are two different things. Wrong to me is that you're allowing something else to replace how you actually feel about something, right? Entertainment, just like what I would say, there's a difference between film and movies, right? Film is meant to make you feel funny. Entertainment is to validate exactly how you feel. So if you're feeling sad and you want a cute puppy movie to make you feel all sweet, it will. That's what it was made to do. If you put on a film and you're feeling sad and it's Andrei Tarkovsky's Nostalgia, it's probably going to devastate you and you're probably not going to want to live tomorrow. So maybe that's not the movie you want at the time or the film, right? So, but the quest for fame to me it's a real shortcoming in our own ability to think that what we do is worth our time. We're often, a lot of times I think it destroys really creative humans, really talented ones who don't like who write something in their book and be like, oh, that's not as good as Beyonce. Well, Beyonce's not as good as fucking Beyonce. She's got I don't know, a $70 million marketing company. She's got 47 producers. When you listen to one voice from on a pop record, it's not one voice. It's about 190 tracks, if not more, and an entire studio of effects, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with Beyonce. She's amazing. No one can move like her. The records mean a lot to people, and I would never undervalue that. But your quest should never to be somebody else. There's one Beyonce, one. Only going to happen one time in history. You are not it. I am not it. And you shouldn't want to be like this, right? It's because I think it gets in the way of your own creativity, because now your creativity, whatever band it is, whatever film it is it's now a block because what you're doing doesn't look or sound like $100 million movie. Of course it doesn't. You don't have the budget. You don't have the tools. You don't have, I don't know. Maybe you do have in your closet 700 animators. I don't know. Maybe you're that fortunate, and I hope you have it. So go for it, right? And it doesn't mean you can't want to strive for success and to be recognized and to have opportunities. And that's where I think if the quest for fame and fortune or success or whatever is actually translated into, I just want to have as many opportunities as I can to be the person and the creator that I am. The desire should be, I hope I can get into a studio that lets me do what I do. That's great. That's a really admirable desire. But you shouldn't subjugate your desire for the idea of having a job that other people think is awesome. And in LA, that's all it is. It's a lot of people talking, I'm an actor, I'm a musician. No one works. You would think that everyone in LA is an actor, musician, director, model's a good one. That's a really funny one. And all because it's just trying to puff up peacock feathers to be like, look what I do. And now we've got Instagram and TikTok and everything else to prove it. Because if you've got 50,000 followers, you must be famous. And it's not true again. It honestly just means the algorithm likes you. Great, a computer likes you. I guess that is something, but it's not the reason why you should be doing this. And it's not really the end result of anything. You really want to be able to create something that'll create more opportunity each time. Boom, boom, boom. And the problem with fame and success is it usually stops people from being creative and actually stops them from growing. If you're a great band, you're lucky if you can make 3 albums that are actually any good. And you're stuck because you can never leave that sound. Never. It just doesn't happen, right? Maybe in the 60s and 70s it happened because they were inventing music. you know, and in like early 80s when hip hop kind of broke, people were allowed to shift a little bit, but not anymore. I mean, if you're lucky and you get, say, as big as Beyonce, I mean, I would love for her to do like a big band record. It'd be awesome to see her really shift like that. And I never understand why, but you can see it every time when they come out with something that's almost just, it's slightly different than what they just did, is that they're they're a bank account for a lot of different people. She's not the only one. She's, you know, she's got, I don't know, probably 500 employees, from the dancers to the venues, to the managers, to the costume designers and all that. And that becomes a huge responsibility. And so you have to be really careful about the fame and fortune thing. And I've never kind of necessarily shunned it. It's just where I put myself and who I surrounded myself with wasn't really where I was heading. And I had opportunities in LA many, many times to get into those worlds, and had and asked a lot to be an actor because I have a certain look or whatever the case may be. And I just was like, that's not really my path. And I will tell you this, when I did William Fichtner's Coldbrook, I didn't know who Bill was. I had my friend Kane who wrote the screenplay, and he's like, Michael, I really want you to score this film. And I was like, cool, man, sure. And he's like, my friend Bill wrote it, and blah, blah, and Kim Coates is in it, Sons of Anarchy. And if you don't know, William Fichtner is, and he's in Batman. He's been in 100 movies. My favorite role he has ever done is in Heat. And if you don't know the movie Heat, I think you have something wrong with you and you need to see the movie Heat. But anyway, he's a huge, huge Hollywood guy. And once I met Bill, I was a little bit like, Kane, you didn't tell me that he's that guy. And I was a little taken aback and a little nervous because and he was a little more Hollywood than I'd ever thought I'd want to deal with, because he did want the movie to sell. Did I lose you? Okay, you guys are still moving. All right. He did want the movie to sell, and so I did get locked into a little bit more of a chamber than I thought I would. But I ultimately was able to figure out, here are the restrictions by Bill, and how to remain myself. But if that was my first movie, I would have been fired, because I wouldn't have been ready for it, because I would have wanted to have been successful, or I would have made the crappiest music I could have made to never lose the job. And you can't do any of this for validation. It's basically what I'm saying. If you're doing this to get validated, I don't know, get a boyfriend, girlfriend, buy a kitten. It's easier. It's way easier. You don't have to give up anything. They're cute as hell. They're going to love up on you no matter what you make. But if you try to get into a world, film or otherwise, and film's obviously the big one that it gets blown up a lot, or a rock star, but even rock stars kind of gone away and now everyone's pop stars. But, and I'm also, I think, of a different generation than most of you, being Gen X. I don't know. I was trained, even my education, we lived in a different time where when we saw pop culture, our first reaction was fuck off. And now popularity has kind of become a source of validation as opposed to a source of control. And I always saw it as control. I don't think that those kind of things are good for any creative human. I don't think they're actually good for your soul. But I also, if you can go make a BMW commercial as a director, and they're going to give you 200 grand, take the fucking money, but then go make something incredibly awesome. It's one of those things I used to tell my students all the time at AMDA, where TK and I both taught, and those kids all wanted to be super famous. That was why they were there. And then they would meet me and they'd think I was dark, because I would kind of think, really? But I always told them, was like, if you get the opportunity to hold the cheeseburger for 50 grand for 30 seconds, take the freaking money, but realize it means nothing. Like, if you made a really awesome film and the world loves it and it sells, I don't know, $700 million, all that means is that your rent's covered, or your mortgage is covered. And I think that's great. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on fame and fortune. It's not something to shun, but it is something to be weary of.